destroyed our 29-year marriage. Not in private. Not behind closed doors. But in front of nearly 50 people. Family. Friends. Business partners. Even our children. The evening was supposed to be a celebration. Our 29th wedding anniversary. The ballroom was beautiful. Soft music filled the room. People laughed. Champagne glasses clinked together. Everyone believed they were attending a happy occasion. Including me. At least until my husband stood up. Michael Parker had always loved attention. As a successful corporate attorney, he knew how to control a room. How to command attention. How to make people listen. And that night, everyone listened. He raised his champagne glass, smiled confidently, and began speaking. I want to thank everyone for being here tonight. People applauded. Michael smiled. Then looked directly at me. I especially want to thank my wife Susan. More applause. I smiled politely, completely unaware of what was coming. Michael continued. Susan has been loyal for 29 years. The room nodded approvingly. But then his expression changed. And so did his tone. Unfortunately, the room grew quiet. Loyalty isn't the same thing as ambition. My smile disappeared. People exchanged confused glances. Michael continued speaking. Completely comfortable. Completely confident. As if what he was doing was perfectly normal. For years, I've worked hard building a successful life. He shrugged. And somewhere along the way, Susan stopped growing. A nervous silence filled the room. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My daughter looked horrified. My son-in-law stared at Michael in disbelief. Several guests looked down at their plates. Embarrassed for me. But Michael wasn't finished. Not even close. Then he delivered the sentence that shattered everything. I'm leaving my wife. The room froze. No one moved. No one spoke. For several seconds, complete silence filled the ballroom. I felt as though all the air had disappeared. What? My daughter whispered. Michael ignored her. Instead, he looked toward the entrance. And smiled. That's when she walked in. Young. Beautiful. Confident. Probably 25. Maybe 26. She wore an expensive designer dress. Perfect makeup. Perfect smile. And she walked directly toward my husband. Then she sat beside him. As if she belonged there. Gasps spread across the room. People couldn't believe what they were seeing. Neither could I. Michael casually placed his arm around her shoulders. Then made the announcement. This is Jennifer. The young woman smiled proudly. We're starting a new life together. The humiliation hit me like a truck. Not because he had fallen in love with someone else. Because he had planned this. Every detail. Every second. Every humiliation. Then Jennifer spoke. And somehow made things worse. Don't worry, Susan. She smiled sweetly. I'm sure everything will work out for you. The way she said it made my stomach turn. Because it wasn't kindness. It was pity. The kind of pity people reserve for someone they believe has already lost. My daughter suddenly stood up. Dad, stop. Michael didn't. He was enjoying himself too much. Then he looked directly at me. And said something I'll never forget. Susan. His voice was calm. Confident. Cruel. You never would have survived without me. The room went silent again. Because everyone knew how insulting those words were. But Michael genuinely believed them. He believed I was weak. Ordinary. Dependent. A woman who needed him. A woman who couldn't succeed on her own. A woman with no future. What he didn't know What Jennifer didn't know, what nobody in that room knew, was that my late grandfather had spent decades preparing for this exact moment. At the time, I knew nothing about it. Nothing. I simply sat there. Broken. Humiliated. Completely shocked. Eventually, I stood up. Not because I was strong. Because I couldn't sit there another second. My daughter rushed toward me. "Mom." Tears filled her eyes. "I'm so sorry." I forced a smile. Then grabbed my purse. For one brief moment, Michael looked uncomfortable. Maybe he expected me to scream. Maybe he expected me to cry. Maybe he wanted a scene. But I gave him nothing. I simply walked away. Without looking back. Without saying goodbye. Without giving him the satisfaction. The drive home felt unreal. 29 years. Gone. Just like that. I kept hearing his words. "You never would have survived without me." The arrogance. The confidence. The certainty. Michael truly believed he had won. He believed he was walking into a better life. A younger woman. A fresh start. A brighter future. And maybe the worst part was this. I believed it too. When I finally arrived home, the house felt empty. Cold. Unfamiliar. I sat alone in the kitchen. Staring into space. Trying to understand how everything had fallen apart. Then my phone vibrated. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Almost. But something made me answer. "Hello?" A man's voice responded. "Mrs. Susan Parker?" "Yes. My name is David Reynolds." I frowned. "I don't think I know you." "You don't." His voice sounded serious. "But I worked for your grandfather." My heart skipped. My grandfather died 22 years ago. "I know." The man paused. Then lowered his voice. "That's exactly why I'm calling." A strange feeling settled in my stomach. "What do you want?" There was a long silence. Then he said 7 words that changed my life forever. "Your husband must never learn this." Part 2. For several seconds, I couldn't speak. The stranger's words echoed in my mind. Your husband must never learn this. I tightened my grip on the phone. What are you talking about? The man lowered his voice. Mrs. Parker, are you alone? I looked around my empty kitchen. The same kitchen where Michael and I had shared breakfast for nearly 3 decades. Now it felt like a stranger's house. Yes. Good. That single word immediately made me nervous. What exactly is this about? The man paused. Then answered carefully. Your grandfather. I frowned. My grandfather has been dead for 22 years. I know. Then why are you calling me now? Another pause followed. Then he said something that made my pulse quicken. Because a condition has finally been activated. I sat up straight. What condition? I'm afraid I can't discuss that over the phone. I hated vague answers. What do you mean you can't discuss it? Exactly what I said. His voice remained calm. This conversation needs to happen in person. My patience was running out. Look, I've had a terrible day. I know. That surprised me. You know? Your husband publicly announced your separation tonight. The room suddenly felt colder. How do you know that? Because my firm monitors certain legal events involving your family trust. Family trust? I frowned. My grandfather left a trust? The man became quiet. Then said something even stranger. Mrs. Parker. You don't know the half of it. A chill ran through my body. What does that mean? I'll explain everything tomorrow. The urgency in his voice was impossible to ignore. Finally, he gave me an address downtown. Then ended the call. For several moments, I simply sat there. Confused. Exhausted. Heartbroken. A condition activated. A family trust. A lawyer from my grandfather. None of it made sense. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Michael standing beside Jennifer. Smiling. Looking proud. As if humiliating me was some kind of achievement. Then I heard his voice again. You never would have survived without me. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. Because Michael genuinely believed it. For 29 years, he had slowly convinced himself that everything good in our life came from him. His career. His success. His money. His decisions. Meanwhile, he treated everything I contributed as if it barely mattered. My volunteer work. My art classes. The years I spent raising our children. The sacrifices nobody noticed. Suddenly, I realized something. Michael didn't just leave me. He underestimated me. And somehow, that realization hurt more. The next morning, I arrived at the address the lawyer had given me. A tall office building overlooking the harbor. The lobby looked expensive. Marble floors. Glass walls. Security guards. The kind of place Michael would have loved. The receptionist immediately recognized my name. Mrs. Parker? Yes. Mr. Reynolds is expecting you. A few minutes later, I entered a large conference room. A man in his late 60s stood beside the window. Silver hair. Dark suit. Calm expression. He extended his hand. Susan Parker. David Reynolds. We shook hands. Then sat down. The moment the door closed, I spoke. What condition activated? David didn't answer immediately. Instead, he opened a thick leather folder. Inside were dozens of documents. Some looked decades old. Others appeared brand new. The lawyer folded his hands. Before we begin, I need to ask you something. What? Has your husband officially filed for divorce? I frowned. Why does that matter? It matters. I sighed. Not yet. David nodded slowly. But he intends to. Obviously. The lawyer leaned back. As expected. The words immediately caught my attention. As expected? Yes. My stomach tightened. What does that mean? Without answering, David opened the folder. Then carefully removed an old envelope. The paper had yellowed with age. The handwriting on the front looked familiar. Very familiar. My heart skipped. Because I recognized it instantly. My grandfather's handwriting. What is that? David gently slid the envelope across the table. I looked down. Then froze. Written across the front were 8 words. For Susan, if her marriage ever ends. I felt the blood drain from my face. What? The lawyer nodded quietly. Your grandfather left that 22 years ago. I stared at the envelope. Unable to move. Unable to think. He expected this? Not exactly. Then why write it? David paused. Because your grandfather planned for every possibility. My hands began trembling slightly. For several moments, I simply stared at the envelope. Then I slowly opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter. The first sentence instantly brought tears to my eyes. My dear Susan. If you are reading this, life has become difficult. I swallowed hard. The room felt completely silent. Almost like my grandfather was sitting there beside me. I continued reading. The first thing you must understand is this. You are stronger than you realize. Tears blurred my vision. I took a deep breath. Then read the next line. And everything changed. The second thing you must understand is that our family owns far more than you have ever been told. I froze. My eyes moved across the sentence again. Then again. Certain I had misunderstood. But the words remained exactly the same. I slowly looked up. What does that mean? David opened another folder. Then pushed several documents toward me. The first page contained numbers. A lot of numbers. The second page contained company names. The third page contained financial statements. None of it made sense. Until I noticed one figure. My heart nearly stopped. Because the number had 9 zeros. What is this? David's expression became serious. This is Bennett Global Holdings. I frowned. I've never heard of it. Most people haven't. The lawyer paused. Then delivered the biggest shock of my life. Your grandfather founded it. The room went silent. What? He started the company 40 years ago. I stared at him, unable to process what I was hearing. My grandfather owned a company? David nodded. A very successful one. My pulse raced. How successful? The lawyer hesitated. Then answered. Current estimated value. He looked directly at me. Approximately $3.8 billion. For several seconds, I couldn't breathe. I simply stared at him. Certain I had heard the wrong number. Million? David slowly shook his head. No. The room spun. Billion? Yes. I looked down at the documents again. Then back at him. Then back at the documents. Nothing felt real anymore. My grandfather wasn't a billionaire. That was impossible. Wasn't it? But David wasn't finished. Not even close. Because then he opened another file. A file labeled with a single name. Michael Parker. The moment I saw it, my stomach dropped. I looked up. Why is my husband's name on that file? David became very quiet. Then he said something that made my blood run cold. Because your grandfather spent years investigating him. Part 3. For several seconds, I couldn't move. I stared at the file. Then at David. Then back at the file. Michael Parker. My husband's name. Printed neatly across the front. My pulse started racing. What do you mean my grandfather investigated him? David remained calm. Exactly what I said. I shook my head. That doesn't make sense. The lawyer slowly opened the file. Inside were reports. Background checks. Financial records. Private notes. Pages and pages of information. All about Michael. The sight made me uncomfortable. Why would my grandfather do this? David folded his hands. Because he didn't trust easily. I frowned. He liked Michael. The lawyer gave a small smile. No. What? He respected Michael's intelligence. David paused. But trust and respect aren't the same thing. A strange feeling settled in my stomach. For years, I believed my grandfather approved of Michael. Apparently, I was wrong. David pulled out a yellow document. This was written 3 months before your wedding. My heart skipped. 3 months? Yes. I looked down. The paper contained my grandfather's personal notes. The first sentence immediately caught my attention. Michael Parker is ambitious. I wasn't surprised. That part was obvious. The second sentence shocked me. His ambition may someday become more important to him than family. I blinked. Once. Twice. Then read it again. The words didn't change. A chill ran through my body. Because it sounded exactly like the man Michael had become. David continued. Your grandfather hired several advisors. To investigate my fiancé? Yes. The room felt surreal. And what did they find? The lawyer hesitated. Then answered. Nothing illegal. I relaxed slightly. Then he continued. But several concerning patterns. My stomach tightened again. What patterns? David opened another page. He consistently measured people based on usefulness. The Centene. NCE felt familiar. Painfully familiar. Michael always admired wealthy people. Successful people. Powerful people. Anyone who could help him move forward. Back then I called it ambition. Now I wasn't so sure. David pointed to another note. If Michael remains humble, this marriage will succeed. Then below it. Another line. A line that made my heart race. If pride ever controls him, Susan will need protection. The room became silent. Because somehow, my grandfather had predicted everything. 29 years ago. I swallowed hard. What kind of protection? David looked directly at me. The trust. My pulse quickened. The company? Yes. The lawyer opened another folder. Inside were legal documents. Complex trust agreements. Corporate ownership structures. Financial protections. I barely understood half of it. Then one sentence jumped off the page. Primary beneficiary, Susan Parker. I stared at it. My name. My future. My life. All hidden for decades. This was always mine? Yes. I couldn't believe it. For 22 years I received modest monthly trust payments. Nothing extraordinary. Just enough to live comfortably. Meanwhile, an entire financial empire existed behind the scenes. And I never knew. Then another question entered my mind. A frightening question. Did Michael know? David answered instantly. No. I felt relieved. Then confused. How? The lawyer smiled. Because your grandfather made sure he couldn't. What does that mean? David leaned forward. The company ownership records were protected. Protected how? The actual beneficiary was hidden. My heart pounded. For 22 years? Yes. The room suddenly felt smaller. Everything my grandfather built. Everything he protected. Everything he planned. It all led to this moment. Then David became serious again. There is something else. Of course there was. There always was. What now? Instead of answering, he removed at another envelope. This one looked newer. The handwriting wasn't my grandfather's. I didn't recognize it. What is that? David's expression changed. Almost nervous. I wasn't planning to show you this today. My stomach tightened. Then why show me? Because of what happened last night. The room grew quiet. What happened last night? David slowly pushed the envelope across the table. My name was written on the front. Nothing else. I opened it. Inside was a single photograph. The moment I saw it, my blood ran cold. Because it showed Michael and Jennifer together. Not last month. Not last year. Much earlier. Far earlier. The date stamped on the corner nearly stopped my heart. 3 years ago. I looked up sharply. No. David nodded. My hand started shaking. No. The lawyer remained silent. The photograph didn't lie. Michael and Jennifer. Standing together. Smiling. 3 years ago. Not months. Years. My entire body went cold. Because suddenly I understood something. The affair wasn't new. The betrayal wasn't recent. And the man who stood in front of 50 people claiming he'd found someone else had actually been living a lie for years. But the worst revelation was still coming. Because David slowly reached for another document and whispered 7 words that made my stomach drop. Jennifer isn't who she claims to be. Part 4. For several seconds, I couldn't breathe. I stared at David Reynolds. Then at the photograph. Then back at him. His words echoed inside my head. Jennifer isn't who she claims to be. My pulse raced. What does that mean? David remained silent for a moment, as if choosing his words carefully. Then he opened another file. A file much thinner than the others, but somehow far more dangerous. Mrs. Parker. His voice became serious. What I'm about to tell you has never been shared with anyone outside a very small group of people. The room suddenly felt colder. I swallowed. What is Jennifer hiding? David slowly slid several documents across the table. At first they looked ordinary. Employment records, financial statements, travel documents. Then I noticed something strange. Different last names, different addresses, different occupations. My heart skipped. What am I looking at? The lawyer folded his hands. Multiple identities. The room froze. What? Jennifer Carter isn't her original name. I blinked. Once. Twice. Certain I misunderstood. What do you mean? David pointed toward a document. She legally changed her name 4 years ago. A chill moved through my body. Why? We don't know. The answer wasn't comforting. It was terrifying. I looked through more papers. The deeper I read, the stranger everything became. Different cities. Different relationships. Different stories. Nothing seemed consistent. Then one detail caught my attention. A name. A wealthy businessman. The date was 6 years old. What is this? David's expression darkened. That's important. My pulse quickened. Why? The lawyer took a deep breath. Because Michael isn't the first wealthy man Jennifer has dated. The room became silent. Completely silent. I stared at him. Unable to speak. Unable to think. Then he continued. She's done this before. The words landed heavily. What exactly are you saying? G? David answered carefully. I'm saying Jennifer has a pattern. My stomach tightened. A pattern? The lawyer nodded. Older successful men. The room spun slightly. I thought about Michael. His expensive suits. His law firm. His obsession with success. His constant need for admiration. Exactly the kind of man Jennifer seemed to pursue. Then David showed me another document. This one contained photographs. Several photographs. Different men. Different years. Different cities. But always the same woman. Jennifer. My pulse raced. Because suddenly something felt very wrong. Very wrong. Then David pointed toward one photograph. This man. I looked closer. A silver-haired businessman. Expensive watch. Luxury yacht in the background. What about him? The lawyer became quiet. She lived with him for almost 2 years. I frowned. And? 3 months after their breakup. David paused. The man lost nearly $20 million. The room went silent. What? The lawyer nodded. Authorities never proved wrongdoing. A chill ran through my body. But the timing raised questions. I stared at the photograph. The smiling woman beside him looked nothing like the innocent influencer Michael described. Then another realization hit me. A terrifying one. Does Michael know any of this? David answered immediately. No. Of course he didn't. Because Michael believed he was the smartest person in every room. The most successful. The most powerful. The least likely to be manipulated. And somehow, that made him the easiest target. Then David leaned forward. What I'm about to say may sound harsh. I nodded. Okay. The lawyer looked directly into my eyes. Your husband thinks he's using Jennifer. The room fell silent. Then he finished the sentence. When in reality, she may be using him. A strange feeling spread through my chest. Not satisfaction. Not revenge. Something else. Concern. Because despite very thing, Michael was still the father of my children. Then another thought entered my mind. A frightening thought. What if Jennifer finds out about the trust? David's face changed instantly. For the first time all morning, he looked worried. Very worried. That's exactly what cannot happen. My pulse quickened. Why? The lawyer slowly closed the file. Because if Jennifer discovered the truth, everything could change. Then he said something that made my blood run cold. Mrs. Parker. Yes? We believe someone has already been searching for information about your grandfather's company. The room froze. What? David opened another document. Inside was a report from 2 weeks earlier. Someone had been making inquiries. Private inquiries. About Bennett Global Holdings. About ownership records. About beneficiaries. My stomach dropped. Who? The lawyer hesitated. Then answered. We don't know. The room became silent. Because suddenly this wasn't just about divorce. Or betrayal. Or Michael's affair. Someone was actively searching for the secret. The same secret hidden for 22 years. Then David pointed toward the final page. A page containing a security alert. My eyes moved down the document. And stopped. Because the investigation had uncovered one terrifying detail. The searches began just 3 days after Jennifer entered Michael's life. I slowly looked up. My heart pounding. And David whispered the words neither of us wanted to say out loud. We don't think meeting Michael was an accident. Part 5. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. I stared at David. Then at the report. Then back at him. His final words echoed in my mind. We don't think meeting Michael was an accident. My heart pounded. What are you saying? David folded his hands. I'm saying Jennifer may have targeted him. The room suddenly felt colder. No. The word came out automatically. Not because I trusted Jennifer. Because the idea sounded insane. How could anyone plan something like that? David opened another document. Normally, I'd agree. He slid the paper toward me. But then we found this. I looked down. At first it seemed harmless. A guest list. Names. Addresses. Phone numbers. Nothing unusual. Until I noticed the date. 3 years ago. My pulse quickened. What is this? The guest list from a charity gala. I frowned. So? David pointed to 2 names. Michael Parker. Jennifer Carter. The room fell silent. Because I immediately remembered that event. Michael told me they met there by accident. A random encounter. A chance conversation. The beginning of an unexpected romance. Apparently, that wasn't true. What am I missing? David pointed toward another page. A registration form. Jennifer had registered for the event 2 months earlier. Part 6. Jennifer had registered for the charity gala 2 months before Michael attended. That alone wasn't proof. But it wasn't the only thing David found. Not even close. The lawyer opened another file. This is where things become interesting. My stomach tightened. Because every time David said that, my life became more complicated. He slid several pages across the table. Phone records. Travel records. Event registrations. Social media archives. The deeper I looked, the worse it became. Jennifer appeared at multiple events Michael attended. Not one. Not two. 7. 7 different events over nearly a year. And every single time, Michael believed they had met by chance. My heart sank. Because Michael wasn't a fool. Arrogant? Yes. Self-centered? Absolutely. But not stupid. Yet somehow, he never noticed. David pointed toward one photograph. A charity fundraiser. Jennifer was standing in the background, watching Michael. Another photo. Business conference. Jennifer again. Different outfit. Different city. Same result. My pulse raced. She was following him. David nodded. It certainly appears that way. The room became silent. Then another thought hit me. A terrifying thought. If she targeted Michael? I swallowed. Then why? David didn't answer immediately. Instead, he opened another folder. A folder marked confidential. Inside was a report from a private investigator. The moment I saw it, my stomach dropped. Because one sentence had been highlighted. Subject showed unusual interest in family wealth structures. What does that mean? David's face darkened. It means Jennifer wasn't interested only in Michael. The room froze. What? The lawyer pointed to another paragraph. My heart nearly stopped. Because the report contained a name. Not Michael's. Mine. I looked up sharply. Why is my name in this report? David answered quietly. Because Jennifer searched for information Abu. Tu. A chill moved through my body. Why would she do that? The lawyer slid another page toward me. The investigator had documented multiple online searches. Susan Parker. Parker family history. Parker estate records. Parker inheritance. My pulse quickened. She wasn't researching Michael. She was researching me. Then David revealed something even worse. The searches began before their relationship became public. The room spun. Because suddenly everything felt connected. The charity gala. The repeated encounters. The secret investigations. The questions about wealth. It wasn't random. It couldn't be. Then my phone vibrated. The sound startled both of us. I looked down. My daughter's name appeared on the screen. Emily. I immediately answered. Emily? Her voice sounded shaky. Mom. My stomach tightened. What happened? There was silence. Then she spoke. Dad came by. I closed my eyes. Of course he did. What does he want? Emily hesitated. Then answered. You. The room became quiet. What do you mean? He wants to meet. I almost laughed. After humiliating me? After destroying our marriage? Now he wanted to meet? Why? Emily took a deep breath. Because Jennifer is gone. My heart stopped. What? The lawyer immediately looked up. I put the call on speaker. Emily continued. She disappeared this morning. David's expression changed instantly. Disappeared? Emily nodded. Dad woke up and she was gone. The room became silent. Then came the real shock. Mom. Yes? She emptied several of his accounts. I froze. David froze. Nobody spoke. Because suddenly the entire story changed. How much? I asked. Emily's answer came quietly. Almost everything. The room spun. Michael Parker. The man who believed he was the smartest person in every room. The man who humiliated me in front of 50 people. The man who thought he had traded up. Had just been robbed. Then Emily said something else. Something that made my blood run cold. That's not the worst part. I tightened my grip on the phone. What now? There was a pause. A long pause. Then Emily whispered. Dad thinks Jennifer knew about the trust. The room froze. I slowly looked at David. David slowly looked at me. Neither of us spoke. Because if Jennifer knew about the trust, then she hadn't disappeared. She was hunting something. And whatever she was looking for, she wasn't finished yet. Then David reached for another document. A document that had arrived only 30 minutes earlier. He stared at it. His face turning pale. For the first time since I met him. The lawyer looked frightened. Very frightened. I swallowed hard. What is it? David slowly raised his eyes. Then whispered 6 words that made my blood run cold. Someone broke into the trust office. Part 7. For several seconds, I simply stared at David. Certain I had misheard him. Someone broke into the trust office. The words didn't make sense. The trust office wasn't some small business. It had security. Cameras. Locked records. Private vaults. How could someone break in? David immediately stood up. His calm expression was gone. Completely gone. For the first time since I met him. He looked genuinely worried. When did this happen? I asked. Early this morning. My stomach tightened. What was taken? The lawyer hesitated. Then answered. That's the problem. What? We don't know yet. The room suddenly felt smaller. Because unknown threats are always worse than known ones. David grabbed his phone. Dialed a number. Then walked toward the window. I listened as he spoke quietly with someone from his office. The conversation lasted less than 2 minutes. But when he returned, his face looked even worse. My heart sank. What happened? David sat down slowly. Then opened his laptop. A security report appeared on the screen. He turned it toward me. The first photograph showed the front entrance. Broken lock. Damaged security panel. Police tape. The second photograph showed a records room. Drawers opened. Files scattered everywhere. The third photograph made my blood run cold. Because one cabinet had been targeted specifically. Only one. Not cash. Not valuables. Not company records. One cabinet. A cabinet containing trust beneficiaries. I looked up sharply. They were looking for names. David nodded. Exactly. The room fell silent. Because suddenly the motive seemed obvious. Someone wanted to know who owned Bennett Global Holdings. Someone wanted to know who controlled billions. Someone wanted to know about me. Then another terrifying thought entered my mind. What if they found it? David didn't answer immediately. Which was answer enough. My pulse raced. David. The lawyer final. LLY spoke. We're still checking. That wasn't reassuring. Not even a little. Then his phone rang. The moment he looked at the screen, his expression changed. What is it? I asked. David answered the call immediately. For 30 seconds he listened. Without speaking. Without moving. Then he slowly lowered the phone. The room became silent. My stomach tightened. What now? David looked directly into my eyes. The cabinet wasn't opened. I exhaled. For the first time all day. Then he continued. Because the person already had the access code. The relief disappeared instantly. What? The lawyer nodded. They didn't force the cabinet. The room spun. Because suddenly everything changed. This wasn't a random break-in. It wasn't a thief. It wasn't an outsider. Whoever entered the office already knew exactly where to go. Exactly what to search. Exactly what mattered. Someone with inside information. Then David opened another report. Security footage. My pulse quickened. Did the cameras capture anything? The lawyer nodded slowly. Yes. My heart started racing. Who was it? David hesitated. Then answered. We don't know. The room froze. What do you mean? The person wore a mask. Of course. A mask. Gloves. Dark clothing. Nothing identifiable. But then David pointed toward one image. A close-up frame. The intruder's wrist was visible. And there was something there. A bracelet. Small. Silver. Decorated with a unique blue stone. The moment I saw it, my stomach dropped. Because I recognized it. Immediately. No. David looked at me. What is it? I stared at the screen. Unable to believe it. Because I had seen that bracelet before. Many times. Around Jennifer's wrist. Then another realization hit me. An even worse one. Jennifer couldn't have done this alone. She didn't know about the trust office. She didn't know where records were stored. She didn't know access codes. Someone helped her. Someone helped her. Someone on the inside. Then my phone rang. Again. Emily. I answered immediately. Emily? Her voice sounded panicked. Mom. What happened? There was crying in the background. Then Emily whispered. Dad's in the hospital. The room froze. What? He collapsed. My heart skipped. Despite everything, Michael was still the father of my children. What happened? Emily took a shaky breath. The police came. My pulse raced. The police? Yes. The room became silent. Then she delivered the sentence that changed everything. They found money transfers. I looked at David. David looked at me. Neither of us spoke. Because we both knew where this was going. What kind of transfers? I asked. Emily's voice trembled. Millions of dollars. The room froze. Then she whispered. From Dad's accounts to Jennifer. I closed my eyes. Because the trap was finally becoming visible. Jennifer hadn't just stolen money. She had been preparing for this for years. But the biggest shock came seconds later. Because Emily said something neither of us expected. Something that made David sit upright instantly. Mom. Yes? The police found another name connected to the transfers. My pulse thundered. What name? There was a pause. Then Emily answered. And the moment she did, David went completely pale. Because the name wasn't Jennifer. It wasn't Michael. And it wasn't mine. It was the name of one of the senior trustees managing Bennett Global Holdings. Which meant only one thing. Jennifer wasn't working alone. And the betrayal went much. Part 8. For several seconds, nobody spoke. The room felt frozen. My phone remained against my ear. Emily was still crying. David was staring at me. And all I could think about was one thing. A senior trustee. One of the people responsible for protecting my grandfather's company. Connected to Jennifer. Connected to the money transfers. Connected to everything. My stomach turned. Because suddenly this wasn't just a family betrayal. It was something much bigger. Much more dangerous. "What's the trustee's name?" David asked. Emily answered immediately. The moment she said it, David closed his eyes. As if he had been punched. "What is it?" I asked. The lawyer looked pale. Very pale. Then he whispered. "Harold Bennett." My pulse quickened. The name sounded familiar. Too familiar. "Who's Harold Bennett?" David looked stunned. "He's been with the company for 27 years. The room fell silent. 27 years. Longer than my marriage. Longer than Jennifer had even been alive. Then another realization hit me. If Harold was involved, then he knew everything. The trust. The beneficiaries. The security systems. The hidden ownership structure. Everything. My heart began pounding. Because for the first time, I realized someone inside my grandfather's empire might be helping Jennifer. Then David suddenly stood up. "We need to leave." "What? Now?" The urgency in his voice startled me. "Why?" David grabbed several files from the table. "Because if Harold was involved, then nobody knew how deep this went. Nobody knew who could be trusted. And nobody knew what information had already been compromised." The room suddenly felt unsafe. Minutes later we were in David's car, driving toward company headquarters. Neither of us spoke much. Both trying to understand what was happening. Then David's phone rang. He answered immediately. For nearly a minute he listened. Without saying a word. Then he slowly read the phone. My stomach tightened. "What now?" The lawyer looked straight ahead. And whispered. "Harold Bennett is missing." The room spun. "What?" "He didn't come to work." My pulse raced. "Maybe he's sick." David shook his head. "No." "Why not?" The lawyer looked at me. "Because Harold's security access card was used." My stomach dropped. "When?" "This morning." The silence that followed felt endless. Because if Harold was missing, yet someone was using his access credentials, then something was very wrong. Very, very wrong. Then David revealed something even worse. The access card was used inside a private archive. My pulse thundered. "What archive?" The lawyer hesitated. Then answered. "The Founder Archive." I frowned. "What is that?" David's face became serious. "It contains every private document your grandfather ever left behind." The room froze. Every document. Every instruction. Every secret. Everything. Suddenly I understood the real target. It wasn't money. Not yet. It wasn't the company. Not yet. Someone wanted information. Information my grandfather spent decades protecting. Then David accelerated. The headquarters building appeared in the distance. The moment we arrived, security escorted us upstairs. The atmosphere felt tense. Employees whispered. Executives looked nervous. Nobody seemed to know what was happening. Inside a conference room, 3 senior board members waited. Their faces looked grim. One woman immediately stood. "Susan." I nodded. She looked exhausted. Then another man spoke. "We found something." My heart sank. Of course they had. "What?" Without speaking, he pushed a folder toward me. Inside was a photocopy. A single page. Just one page. But the moment I saw it, my blood ran cold. Because it contained my name. My full legal name. Then I noticed something else. A date. A future date. 3 months from now. What is this? Nobody answered immediately. David finally spoke. It's an activation directive. My pulse quickened. An activation for what? The room became silent. The kind of silence that only happens before terrible news. Then one of the board members answered. A succession transfer. I frowned. What does that mean? David swallowed hard. It means your grandfather planned one final ownership transfer. The room froze. What? The lawyer nodded slowly. We thought the trust was the final stage. My heart pounded. It isn't? David looked directly into my eyes. No. The room became completely silent. Because suddenly the billions didn't matter anymore. There was something else. Something my grandfather had hidden even from the trustees. Then David pointed toward the bottom of the page. A section partially damaged. Almost unreadable. Almost. But not completely. Because one sentence remained visible. One sentence that changed everything. I read it once. Then again. Unable to believe it. The words made my blood run cold. Only reveal the true heir if Susan's marriage ends in betrayal. The room froze. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Because according to my grandfather, I wasn't the final beneficiary. There was someone else. A hidden heir. Someone nobody knew existed. And somewhere out there, that person had no idea they were about to inherit part of a multi-billion-dollar empire. Part 9. A hidden heir. The words echoed through my mind long after the meeting ended. A hidden heir. Someone my grandfather had kept secret for decades. Someone important enough to include in a multi-billion-dollar succession plan. And somehow, nobody knew who that person was. Not the trustees. Not the board. Not even David. For the first time since this nightmare began, the answer seemed farther away than ever. Then one of the board members spoke. We found something else. My stomach tightened. Of course they had. There was always something else. What now? The woman slid another folder across the table. Inside were copies of old letters. Very old letters. Some were nearly 30 years old. Others were even older. Most appeared ordinary. Until I noticed one name appearing again and again. A woman's name. Someone I had never heard of. Who is this? The room became silent. Nobody answered immediately. Then David took a deep breath. We think she may be connected to the hidden heir. My pulse quickened. Connected how? The lawyer opened one of the letters. It was written by my grandfather. The handwriting was unmistakable. I began reading. The first few paragraphs seemed harmless. Business updates. Travel plans. Family news. Then I reached one sentence. And my heart stopped. One day Susan must know the truth. I looked up sharply. What truth? David slowly shook his head. We don't know yet. The room felt smaller. Because suddenly this wasn't about Jennifer. Or Michael. Or even the company. This mystery had started decades before any of them entered my life. Then another board member entered the room. He looked exhausted. As though he had been running for hours. The moment he arrived, everyone stood. What happened? He looked directly at David. Then at me. And delivered shocking news. We found Harold Bennett. The room froze. My pulse raced. Where? The man swallowed hard. In a MO. The man swallowed hard. In a motel outside the city. David stepped forward. Is he alive? The room became silent. Then came the answer. Yes. Relief flooded through me. For about 2 seconds. Then the man continued. But he's terrified. My stomach tightened. What do you mean? The board member hesitated. Then answered. He says Jennifer wasn't the one giving orders. The room exploded into silence. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Because for months, we had treated Jennifer as the mastermind. The planner. The manipulator. The threat. Now everything changed. Who was giving the orders? David asked. The man looked pale. Very pale. Then answered. He doesn't know. My heart sank. What? He communicated through messages. The room became silent. No meetings. No names. No faces. Only instructions. Money transfers. Information requests. Access codes. Everything hidden. Everything anonymous. Then Harold revealed something that changed everything. The board member opened his notebook. Read directly from it. The person wanted one thing. My pulse quickened. What? The board member looked at me. Then read the next line. Find the true heir before Susan does. The room froze. Completely froze. Because suddenly the hidden heir wasn't just part of the story. The hidden heir was the center of it. The real target. The real reason behind everything. The break-in. The stolen money. The investigations. The betrayals. Everything. Then my phone vibrated. I looked down. Unknown number. The room became silent. David immediately noticed. Don't answer. I stared at the screen. The phone kept ringing. Then stopped. A second later. A text message arrived. My stomach dropped. Because it contained only one sentence. One sentence that made my blood run cold. I know who the heir is. Nobody spoke. I slowly showed David. The lawyer's face turned white. Then another message arrived. If you want truth, come alone. The room became silent. Then a final message appeared. An address. A location. And one line that changed everything. Bring the letter your grandfather left behind. My pulse thundered. Because there was only one person who knew about that letter. Someone close. Someone watching. Someone who had been one step ahead this entire time. And for the first time, I realized the hidden heir might be much closer than anyone imagined. Much closer. In fact, the answer might have been sitting inside my own family all along. Part 10, final. I stared at the phone. Then at the address. Then at David. Nobody spoke. Because deep down, we all knew this was the end. The end of the mystery. The end of the lies. The end of the secrets my grandfather had buried for decades. I have to go. David immediately shook his head. No. I don't have a choice. Susan, this could be dangerous. Maybe he was right. But after everything that had happened, I needed answers. Not tomorrow. Not next week. Now. An hour later, I arrived at the address. It was an old lakeside cabin nearly 2 hours outside the city. Quiet. Isolated. Almost forgotten. The perfect place for someone who didn't want to be found. My heart pounded as I approached the door. Then I noticed something strange. The door was already open. I stepped inside. And froze. Because sitting at the table was not Jennifer. Not Harold. Not some mysterious criminal mastermind. It was Emily. My daughter. For several seconds, I couldn't breathe. Emily? She looked up. Tears filled her eyes. Mom. The room spun. What are you doing here? My daughter looked terrified. Then she said something that changed everything. I'm the heir. Silence. Complete silence. I stared at her, unable to understand what I had just heard. What? Emily slowly pushed a folder across the table. Inside were letters, photographs, DNA reports, legal documents. My hands trembled as I opened them. Then I saw the truth. The hidden woman from my grandfather's letters. The mystery that had haunted everyone. The secret heir. It wasn't a stranger. It wasn't another family. It wasn't some hidden child. It was Emily. My daughter. The granddaughter my grandfather loved more than anything. Years earlier, he had quietly created a secondary succession plan. A plan nobody knew existed. Not even me. If betrayal ever destroyed my marriage, part of the company would transfer directly to Emily. Protected from spouses. Protected from lawsuits. Protected from greed. My grandfather had designed it himself. Decades ago. I slowly sat down, trying to process everything. Then another question entered my mind. A frightening one. If you're the heir. I swallowed. Then why didn't you tell me? Emily began crying. Because she only found out 3 weeks earlier. My stomach tightened. What? She nodded. Grandpa's final attorney contacted me. Everything suddenly made sense. The secret meetings. The nervous behavior. The strange phone calls. She wasn't hiding betrayal. She was hiding the truth. Then another realization hit me. Jennifer. Emily nodded slowly. She found out. The room froze. Of course she did. That was what all of this had been about. The trust. The break-in. The stolen files. The investigations. Jennifer wasn't hunting billions. She was hunting the heir. Then Emily revealed the final piece. The anonymous messages. I looked up. What about them? Emily lowered her eyes. I sent them. The room fell silent. For a moment I felt angry. Confused. Hurt. Then I understood. She was scared. Scared of Jennifer. Scared of the trustee conspiracy. Scared of losing everything. Most importantly, scared of putting me in danger. Then the cabin door opened. I turned and saw David. Behind him stood 2 police officers. And behind them, Jennifer. Handcuffed. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Jennifer looked exhausted. Defeated. The confidence was gone. The arrogance was gone. Everything was gone. David stepped forward. It's over. I looked at Jennifer. Why? For the first time. She answered honestly. Because I was tired of having nothing. The room became silent. Jennifer wiped away tears. I saw wealthy people living perfect lives. She laughed bitterly. And I convinced myself they didn't deserve it. No one responded. Because there was nothing left to say. Then David revealed the final truth. Harold Bennett had confessed. The money transfers. The stolen records. The break-in. Everything. In exchange for money. In exchange for promises. In exchange for greed. Just greed. Nothing more. The conspiracy that nearly destroyed my family had started with greed. The same greed my grandfather spent decades trying to protect us from. 3 months later, Jennifer accepted a plea agreement. Harold lost everything. His career. His reputation. His fortune. Michael survived the scandal. But barely. His law firm forced him to resign. Many of his clients left. His public reputation collapsed. And Jennifer? She disappeared from his life forever. One afternoon, several months later, Michael came to visit me. For the first time in years. He looked humble. Older. Tired. Human. We sat together quietly. Neither of us spoke for a while. Then he finally broke the silence. Susan. Yes? I'm sorry. The words sounded real. Not strategic. Not calculated. Real. For a moment I thought about everything. The anniversary dinner. The humiliation. The affair. The lies. The betrayal. Then I remembered something my grandfather once told me. Bitterness keeps you connected to the people who hurt you. Forgiveness sets you free. I smiled gently. And nodded. Not because he deserved it. Because I deserved peace. A year later, Bennett Global Holdings was stronger than ever. Emily joined the board. David remained our trusted advisor. And I started a charitable foundation using part of the company's profits. Helping women rebuild their lives after betrayal. Helping families recover from hardship. Helping people who believed their lives were over. Because I once believed the same thing. One evening, Emily and I stood beside my grandfather's grave. The sun was setting. The world felt peaceful. She looked at me. Do you think Grandpa knew all this would happen? I smiled. No. Then why prepare for it? I looked at the engraved stone. Then toward the horizon. And finally answered. Because real love doesn't protect people when life is easy. Emily nodded. I continued. It protects them when life becomes difficult. For a moment neither of us spoke. Then I realized something. Michael had been wrong from the very beginning. I didn't need him to survive. I never did. I simply needed the chance to remember who I was. And thanks to my grandfather, I finally had. The end.